Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, everybody, and to my co-readers. It's nice to be here. And this is Radio Water, my new book. Thank you, Michelle, for everything you do. Like, just such a wonderful experience working with you in Roadside. It's just amazing. As those of you also published by Michelle know, right, how wonderful an experience it's been. Okay, I have three stories. This is a collection of flash fiction, and flash fiction is typically under 1,000 words. And most of my stories, even in the collection, tend to be like around 300 or 400 words. But I have some longer stories, and I'm going to read two of the longer stories and one shorter story. So this is called Fish Sweat. All over the counter in our bungalow kitchen, my mother, bandana tying up her tired hair. My mother asking me how bad I want to eat. These fish are a mess, she says, all slime and goo and fish sweat. No such thing as fish sweat, I think, but my mother has never, not once in her life, called a thing what it really is. Every so often, she stops to stare out the gingham window to see if my father's car is pulling up. He said he was going back to that fishing shack we stopped at last night to pick up some bait, where he asked the young woman who ran it what was the best spot to fish on the lake, how we all of us heard her saying how she's running the shack by herself since her husband died, her tan belly showing out from her midriff top. And then my father going out by himself early this morning, coming back with 5 whole fish, each one slimier and smellier than the one before it, and me having exactly no appetite, not after watching the sweat trickle out of my mother's bandana, her wiping it off with the back of her rubber-gloved hand, her thwacking the heads off the fish one by one and tossing them into the bucket like they were somebody's father, somebody's husband, and me standing there next to her, wondering exactly how many fish this was going to take. The next story is a little bit longer, and it's called Cross Country, and it's in sections. So I'll just pause for a couple of seconds after each section. Cross Country. An hour into our cross-country car ride, I realize I hate Harry. I look at his sockless feet in the brown leather loafers, a smug look that stretches all the way up to his face. Near Philly, I tell Harry I need to pee. You always need to pee, he says. And that's true. Peeing is like smoking for me, a way to get myself out of the world for 2 minutes. I've been holding it in since New York. Harry exhales, his breath smugging up the air. He turns off at the next exit. Too late, I tell him, my favorite undies soaked against the seat. Okay, this is out of sequence, but important. It's 5 days later, outside Arizona. I have, by now, murdered Harry. Stuffed him in the trunk under his duffel. We were going to hike the Grand Canyon. The duffel is bulging with hiking gear. Right now it's holding Harry down like a paperweight. Back to now. Harry is arguing with the GPS. You drive us into a lake, you nitwit. Good one, Harry, I say. Usually I admire his pluck with electronics, how he yells at his fitness tracker for not counting enough steps, how he yells at the blender, stop, it's already a smoothie. But today, everything's bothering me about Harry. Days later, we stop for lunch in Kansas or Missouri or Kansas. The waitress is young and Harry is looking her up and down. Eyes on the menu, I finally say. Don't you have to pee, he asks. And I do, like crazy, only there's no way I'm leaving the table. I pee right there on the vinyl seat. Harry looks shocked. The waitress looks shocked. I'll have the eggs, I simply say. In Colorado, we find one of those stops where the truckers take showers. I tell the guy at the counter I'm having woman troubles. He nods and says his mother has that and warns that we don't get many women, so it might be a little rough in there. I tell him I've seen rough. I look at Harry. I'll be fine, I say. Back in the car, I noticed lipstick on Harry's collar. I wish he wasn't such a cliche. It must have happened while I was in the shower, while I was trying not to notice the girly pictures slapped all over the walls. Harry must have found something in the hooker aisle and taken it out back. Whatever it was, wore blood red lipstick. I tell Harry we need to find a hardware store. We find one in Utah. I tell Harry if we're hiking, we'll need to build a fire. Good thinking, he says. I walk over to the axe aisle and pick out a small one. I run the blade along his fingers. I run the blade along his neck. Let's get you some hiking socks, I say. We go up to the counter. He motions to the restroom. Go now, he says. You know how you can get. Don't worry, I tell him. I'm good. The last story is, and that's not a true story, okay? Just saying. This next story is a title story, Radio Water. Every morning that June, we would watch Ralphie dip into the lake behind our summer house. Ralphie came from nuclear country and told us the lake was radioactive. Radio water, he called it. He never told us much about where he came from, so we didn't know if it was a bomb or what. He would just point to the hairless patch above his right ear. He did say that whatever happened left him mostly immune to further radiation, and that's why he could swim untouched in the lake. My little brother told us he didn't believe Ralphie, said he saw him through the window one day with a razor and shaving cream. Father had told us that this would be our final summer at the lake. He said he would be leaving us for good to live with the other family he made when my mother wasn't watching him every goddamn minute, which is how my mother would later describe it. My parents didn't speak to each other anymore. She wouldn't even look in his direction, not when he burned hamburgers on the grill or when he zoomed his car away each night after supper. One morning late in July, we were watching Ralphie like always, how he would dip his toe in, then up to his waist, finally knifing himself through the water to the other side where the rowboats knocked and swayed. Ralphie explained that the rowboats were also immune and that's why the water hadn't eaten them. One other morning, my father showed us picked photos of his other family, all of us looking except, of course, for my mother. Same number of kids in his other family, 2 boys, 2 girls. They were younger than us, newer. They were swimming in a lake. They were eating perfect hamburgers. Later, we went outside to see Ralphie coming out of the radio water and wrapping himself in a Spider-Man towel. He looked at us watching and held up his right hand, 2 fingers only. Guess I'm not completely immune, he called over. Beads of radio water on his face, and my little brother telling us that Ralphie was folding his other fingers back. Ralphie palmed the water off of his face and walked over to my brother. Listen, Pipsqueak, he said, his chest glistening in the sunlight, glowing almost uranian. I'd throw you in, but that water would fizz you up alive. The next time my father showed us his new family, my little brother wandered outside, slapped the screen door closed behind him, and walked over to the water's edge. He just stood there looking at the spot where the boats sway. I walked outside one night after supper. My father was sitting by the hammock that was always filled with mosquitoes from the rain. By this time, every other night, my father had driven off to his other family. But not that night. That night he was sitting very still, hands in his lap and looking down at the ground. We all went to bed, and it wasn't until later when something woke me up. I looked at the window to see my father loading up the car with all of his suitcases, along with a bundle of some kind, the exact shape of my little brother. Ralphie told everyone the next day that my little brother must have wandered into the radio water and just fizzed away. Like my fingers, he said, holding up his hand, like my hair. I thought back to my little brother doubting everything Ralphie said. I thought back to the last night watching my brother disappear into my father's other family. Now that my mother didn't have my father to ignore, she became chatty and younger somehow. We never talked about my little brother anymore. Ralphie's story seemed to be enough for her. It's like my brother fizzing away in the radio water was an easier thing to believe. End of August, and my mother told us we would be coming back next summer. She had fallen in love with the nearby hiking trails and woke us up at 6 a.m. each morning for a run. She ignored the men who came to examine the lake, who told her the water was safe to swim in, ignored Ralphie even when his hair grew in and she could see his fingers plain as day, ignored the photo my father sent with my little brother seated on his knee and smiling as if for the first time in his life. My mother waved it away and said, "That's a boy who looks like your brother. That doesn't make him your brother." When she said it, she looked off across the lake at the boats still swaying and knocking, the boats that maybe even only look like boats. Thank you very much.